Are there fan theories that actually informed the writing of the second season?
There are not. We actually made a very concerted effort at a certain point to stop looking at Reddit for that very reason. We just didn't want to have, we just kind of wanted to be in our writer bubble with our writers in the room. That said, I know that at least one of our writers checked in recently and was like, oh, like one person, some of the things that we are doing and that we have been planning for a while have come up in the speculation, which hopefully those people will feel very proud of themselves.
That person should get a Reddit award.
Gold star.
Something like that.
I don't know when it was that a show has captured viewers' citizen detective minds as much as, to use the phrase that Misty uses to describe herself, as much as Yellowjackets did. The Reddit private investigators were out in force with Yellowjackets. What was that like to experience?
It was surreal, definitely surreal. You hope that people will watch the show and respond to the show, but the level of passion and enthusiasm that the fans of the show were just bringing to the table was astounding.
Bart also said something the other day, which was when 50,000 or more, or how many other people are opining about this, when all those people are saying something about the show, somebody is going to be right. And it was really interesting how the audience predicted certain things that we either did in the show or that we noodled in the writer's room and dispensed with.
And how did you work to connect the characters' teen selves with their adult selves and what they were each going through in an episode?
A lot of people have responded to the physical likeness between our teen cast and our adult cast. And it's funny because I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think we feel the same way, which is that we're really looking for the energetic match. Mm-hmm. And so when we're looking at footage and we're thinking like, does this story and the story talk to each other? The question is on an energetic level and a thematic level, but not necessarily on a direct cut from like face to face or anything like that. We really, I think, don't value that as much as we value the stories speaking to each other on a visceral level. So it's like really impacting the audience and they're getting a sort of dramatic single punch from it.
What was the biggest lesson you learned from season 1 that you have applied to the second season? Why are you laughing?
I wish I knew.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think the biggest lesson that I learned is, when the idea is just a beat kind of on the board, like you talk about it so much, there's so many drafts, then you shoot it, then you edit it, and you're just like with it for a very long time. And so there is like a sort of like, almost like a visceral feeling of like a Yellowjackets idea that is going to feel good all the way at the end of the process. And so it's just to trust that initial kind of reaction more.
And to also not freak out when we walk down the wrong roads.
Yeah.
Because now we understand that that is part of the process. It's an intrinsic part of the process that we need to get comfortable with.
My next question applies to that, which is, were there any big twists or reveals that changed in the process in season 1, that changed in the process of writing or during production?
We changed a couple of things. Yeah. Nothing too major, but we played around a lot with how we were going to introduce adult Lottie into our story. Ooh. And it was really only at the very end of production that we landed on what we landed on. And once we were shooting it, I feel like we all very much felt like we had made the right decision. But that was something that
Who the fuck is Lottie Matthews?
Who the fuck is Lottie Matthews? We played around with it quite a bit.
So many mystery shows fall apart at the end. What, if any, shows are ones that you consider to be a show that you felt was great all the way through that you can emulate for Yellowjackets?
You mean specifically mystery shows?
Well, or not, if there isn't, because I honestly couldn't think of one.
I mean, I'll say, in terms of just something I think is a perfect show from start to finish, Sopranos is at the top of the list for me. Obviously not a mystery, but just the constant deepening of the world of those characters and what they mean to the audience is something that we would love to emulate. In terms of mystery shows, I thought Dark did a pretty good job. I mean, it was so incredibly intricately plotted, and it worked. I feel like ultimately it worked, you know, and you end up thinking about it quite a bit and trying to poke holes in it. Your brain wants to, it's just so complex. But I thought that they did a really nice job.
As you were planning the first season, did you know early on what questions you wanted to answer by the end of the season and which ones you wanted to leave mysteries for now?
We knew we were going to answer the question of who was blackmailing them. We knew that we were going to answer the question of how Jackie died. We knew we weren't going to answer the question of who was the girl in the pit in the beginning. So I think we pretty much stuck to the plan in terms of knowing what questions we wanted to answer and what questions we wanted to raise over the course of the season.
Yeah, I think if anything is challenging as we go along that process, it's the Easter eggs that we want to lay in for the really ardent viewers, which seems to be quite a few, luckily, because we don't want to tip our mitt and have them figure it out. At the same time, you know, we want to reward them for thinking deeply about the architecture of the show.
Jonathan, you've run shows before, so this question is for Ashley and Bart. What surprised the two of you about this process that you couldn't see coming from after years of working in writers' rooms?
For me, it was definitely the volume of the job. I have a friend, when he was talking about a kind of med school, he said the key to surviving a med school, this is horrifying actually, is like at each test you just have to decide the part that you are definitely going to fail. Even with the three of us, like, I mean, it's just, there's just so many things, there's just not enough hours kind of in the day. So it's like having to develop a skill set of like, what can you let sort of happen, or like, how do you check in on it? And just like the volume was something that I was not prepared for.
At the beginning, if this matters, of my career, I always thought, well, I'm going to run a show and I'm going to do it single-handedly, and that was something I aspired to after I had a couple of really great mentors like John Wells and a couple other people who kind of let me in early on the process. But at this point in my career, I just want to surround myself with great people and partner up and collaborate with great people, period.
How close are you to announcing the casting of Adult Lottie, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say Adult Van, and maybe some other survivors that we haven't seen in the present day?
I don't know how close we are to announcing it.
We are.
Well, okay.
You're basically witnessing a dramatic non-disclosure right now.
I will give you probably a
And
too
may I break
honest
the
answer.
exclusive?
We really hope we're very close. We're really pulling to be close soon.
As I mentioned, I rewatched the show when I had COVID. And from the beginning, I was like, how many people survived? You know, like how many people are in the wilderness? I'd be pausing and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, and every time I thought I had a handle on how many people there were, so I would be like, who's that?
We urge you to stop doing that.
Yeah. But were you deliberately kind of fudging that and making it hazier so people couldn't?
We were.
Yeah.
I think that the most accurate depiction is in episode 3 when they're holding the funeral.
I counted 18.
You're meticulous, Kate.
You know, we knew that we were going to want to give ourselves some room to introduce some more characters in season 2 and potentially beyond. So it was a combination of being purposefully a little bit vague and also just the production challenges, because we already have a very large cast, and when you have people who are essentially going to be characters in the background who might grow later, it's a very difficult thing to do.
What was something that viewers guessed that you were surprised by?
Well, I can tell you something that they guessed. I think I can tell you something that they guessed that we chose not to do, which is about Adam. Can I tell? Or shall
Well, I think that you just did.
Well, we did entertain the notion that Adam was basically Javi come back to sort of torment Shauna in a way, or torment the Yellowjackets. And we fairly early on dispensed with that idea. It did not feel organically right to us. And it didn't feel to deliver on the promise of what we actually wanted to dramatize with her affair and their marriage. So we chose not to, but some people called it and were, I think, eager to see it happen. Then it creates the scenario where, well, did we disappoint those people or did we delight them?
But at what point did he become just some guy?
It was pretty early.
Yeah,
Pretty
it was
early.
pretty
Pretty early
yeah.
on.
Yeah.
It just felt more right to us in the story we were telling. It felt infinitely more tragic to us. You know, it being Javi come back is fun in a way, but it feels a little mustache twirly, which is not necessarily the place we want to go. Whereas him being the wrong guy in the wrong place felt so much more devastating, both in terms of his death and in terms of what it might mean for Shauna.
The opening credits are incredible. Are you going to do the same thing with the second season, despite the fact that now you know that people will be screenshotting from the very first episode?
I guess we'll have to discuss it, but I would advocate that we not change it too much.
Well, I think we should argue about it right now.
Yeah.
Right now, on camera.
But I sort of feel like it would be great to drop in some scenes,
some
footage.
yes,
but
yeah,
now
yeah.
we have much more of a keen understanding of how it will be scrutinized.
I think there will be moments that were specifically from season one that will be fun to swap out for things for season two. I've always been a big fan of, I think of, just when a new season comes up, and there two that come to mind are Veronica Mars and The Wire, where they would just change it enough that you're like, okay, we're in for a new ride.
It's great that you loved it, though, and that the audience seems to like it, because we were considering not having one. You know, and we are all from the school of let's have a great opening sequence that puts you in the headspace to enjoy the show. And some people say, well, they'll skip it, but actually we found that people weren't skipping it.
Right.
Yeah.
Where are you in the writing for the second season, and when is production beginning?
We're really in the weeds on it in a good way. We've got crazy, I think you once called them murder boards, of ideas everywhere, color-coded with the different timelines. It's actually an infinite whiteboard. It's almost like a nightmare, actually. It's digital, but we also concretize it, and we've written some outlines, which we have delivered to Showtime, and we have begun writing the season as well in terms of the scripts.
Production start date?
End of August.
In the 2021 timeline, they've been out of the wilderness for more than 20 years. Will we find out what it is that caused this crisis point to happen at this particular, like they've been living relatively normal lives for 20 something years?
I would say yes. I feel like it's actually a number of factors, a confluence of events, but I think that ultimately the why now is sort of an unanswerable question, because we are talking about trauma and the past and how it can haunt you. And I think that why certain things bubble up at certain points is open for interpretation. We have, I think, a number of answers, some more concrete than others, but we always want things to be a little bit open to interpretation. So I guess that's a long way of saying that I think some answers are coming, or at least, some, we're gonna be implying some things, but.
Yeah, I have a personal answer, which probably says more about me than it does about the show, which is simply middle age. And in a way, but I also mean that thematically, because they experienced something very traumatic in the wilderness, but one of the conceits that we've always run with is they've also never felt oddly more free than when they were in the wilderness, with all the social conventions falling away, where they had to survive and build their own little society to protect themselves and get along until they were rescued. And now in middle age, I think they're feeling trapped, and I think they've got an appetite, believe it or not, as perverse as it is, for the freedom they experienced when they were suffering.
There are people on the internet who think that Jackie is not dead, despite us seeing her absolutely dead.
Jackie is dead.
Jackie is dead.
Jackie is dead.
Despite being totally dead, might we see Ella Purnell in the second season anyway? After all, she's been haunting Shauna in the 2021 present.
I would call it a definite possibility.
Does the show Yellowjackets believe in the supernatural?
All right.
Yeah, here we go. Let's roll up our sleeves. Here we go.
What I think is so perfect is that we've constantly taken polls in the writers' room who believes in the supernatural amongst us. And it's a pretty even split. And I think that is absolutely perfect and largely demonstrative of the attitude of the show itself. I think that that's an unanswerable question. Does the supernatural exist? And nobody can say with any certainty. They can say what they believe, but they can't prove it. And so that is something we're very much playing with in the show.
Yeah, and I would just add that the show believes the phenomenology of like supernatural experience is real, that something is happening. When someone thinks that they are engaging with, like a ghost, say, right? Like, I'm not saying that this ghost is real and like the show is not, but that person is having an experience. And that experience could be based in psychosis and metaphor or in something genuinely supernatural. And so I think what the show is very kind of interested in is, where the overlap between those three things are and how they shape a kind of behavior and belief.
Because I think the show also traffics in a kind of feral biology where, human beings, when reduced to kind of a state of nature, if you look back at our history, we absorb information and energy from other human beings very fast. Is this person a threat? Is it not a threat? Sometimes you meet a person and you have an immediate positive reaction to that person or a negative reaction to that person. And so along with the supernaturalism that we're exploring and certainly open to, we're also open to the idea that certain people alchemically create an energy amongst themselves that is either positive or negative. And so these characters may be on one side or other of that ledger.
Could there ever be 3 timelines, one in the present day, one in the 1996 wilderness, and a third one in their lives at home after they're rescued? Wait, you made a face that made me think that I guessed correctly, but...
Their lives post-rescue is something we've very much talked about exploring in the future.
Okay, I'm going to ask you some rapid-fire questions.
These are not our strong suit. I'll just warn you right in the front.
We'll try and rapid-fire answers.
And these are obviously leading us into spoiler territory, which you may or may not want to delve into. Feel free to say, I don't want to answer, So in season 2, will we find out what happened to Shauna's baby?
Who's going to hit the buzzer first? I just want to. We trust and we trust and frankly love each other so much that we don't want to run afoul of like our internal code. That is what you're feeling.
You can say yes.
Yes.
I will say yes.
Okay. Will we learn more about who lived in the cabin?
Also an excellent question.
Yeah.
I don't know if we should give these. I don't
know.
know.
This is like very succulent material. that you're
Yeah, well,
asking
and
about.
I am also just so biased because I don't want to know anything, but I also look for it. So it's like I want the world to protect me from myself with spoilers.
But I feel like this is I'm just gonna go ahead and say yes to that one too.
Okay, do it. I totally endorse your recklessness.
Yes.
And we talked about adult Lottie already. Adult Van. I don't think Van is dead. And maybe other survivors who are maybe more in those background.
I will hit the buzzer and say, I think it's safe to say that we have not met all the survivors.
Yeah, that's a good.
I assume we will find out more about those guilty remnant-looking people who kidnapped Nat in the finale, the cult of Lottie or whoever they are.
Yes, we will learn some more about them.
Is there a specific meaning of the symbol that the Reddit people think is a symbol for cannibalism? Like, is there an answer to that question?
If it's safe to say that we will continue to excavate the meaning of the symbol, the answer is yes, and we do have a strong sense of why it exists.
Will we find out why Allie, who's specifically younger, was at the reunion for the class of 1996?
That's one that is not necessarily, the deepest dive or a conspiracy theory. In our minds, Allie is very much, she considers herself having been on the team.
I
think
see.
she's co-opted their tragedy and also is, very involved in the alumni association.
Got it.
So, she was technically a freshman when they were seniors, but she has been very involved in keeping the torch lit. She has very much decided that this is her story as well.
I love that. And will we find out what happened to Javi? Because he's not in the finale.
I'm going to pass on that
I
one.
think we need to pass on that one.
Yeah.
Will we find out who killed Travis? You could pass.
Yeah, I think we should pass.
I think we should pass. I mean, you're very enticing, very
Yeah.
you're very
Yeah.
alluring.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, it's hard, yeah.
We're pleasers too, so we want to please you.
You're making me very angry right now. Jonathan, you and I talked about this a little bit when we spoke before the finale, but Jackie's diary that has post her being dead references, there's a logical explanation to that. Will we find out that Shauna wrote those entries? I'm just going to guess.
Well, I don't want to go and say we will find out that Shauna wrote those entries necessarily, but we will find out why they exist.
And Thaisa sees a man with no eyes a bunch of times. Are we going to find out who that guy is? Scary, scary, scary man.
We will see more of the man with no eyes.
Will we find out what Ty's smile meant when she terrifyingly is smiling as she wins the election, right as her wife is discovering the beheaded biscuit and the shrine?
Well, I find it rather interesting that you're not sure. And I think that's fodder for the writer's room in a way. Like your reaction surprises us, I think, actually a little bit, in a good way. And we will take that back and make hay of it.
Okay, all right. Glad to be of service. There's a man who says, "We've been waiting for you," to Jackie, or to, I don't know whether it's to her, but in her head as she's dying. Will we learn who that man is?
We will deepen sort of the understanding of like what is going on. I say deepen because I don't know that it's possible to fully kind of resolve some of the things that we're trying to play with. Like in terms of, like just see some of our previous answers, but like I think we will learn more.
Our goal is to explore a little further the place.
In season 2, will the girls eat a person?
Well, we know they eat a person eventually.
Yes.
I think it's funny. I've never stared off into space more during an interview. My eyes are searching distant landscapes for the answer to whether or not we should.
I have
Answer.
I have maybe a useful non-answer. Sorry, it's definitely a sidestep.
I'll take it.
But we as a show won't tease the audience with things. I hate that as a viewer. If things don't happen, it is not just to like artificially like elongate, like, oh, we know you want this, and so like we're just gonna drag it out. Things that do take maybe longer than is always comfortable, like is about like the story kind of unfolding and about getting more and more context for a moment. So that's my non-answer.
Yeah, and my non-answer is, as funny as the show is, I think we also are very much drawn to a kind of existential tension and dread. And as Bart says, we're not just teasing it out to elongate it and pad it. We like that feeling of dread, and we think it's useful in the telling of the story because of how they're suffering and because of the PTSD that they're saddled with, ultimately as grown-ups. And in the midst of that, I think we can commit to like delivering on our promise to answer questions eventually in a satisfying way.
Do the actors know what happened in the wilderness, and have they clamored to know?
That's really funny because our incredibly talented cast and diverse cast, they have very different approaches to that. Some of our actors want to know what we have planned, and some of them don't want to know at all.
In whatever stage you are of the writing of season 2, as you're going to start production at the end of the summer, what are you thinking in terms of the length of the show?
I mean, I think that's a really difficult, if not impossible, question to answer at this point. We are still in a place where we feel like there's more story to tell currently. I think that when we get to a point, if we get to a point where we feel like we either need more or less runway, I think it'll become clear to us. But I think it's difficult to predict that far out. And we try to just stay in it and stay in the story that we're telling right now. So we're sort of not particularly concerned right now with whether this is a 3-season or 4-season or 8-season show. It's just right now we're working on season 2.
I feel like the show is going to tell us, when it's finished. And I think I can safely say that the three of us wouldn't be able to work the way we work if we had lost interest in this ensemble of people.